VocalEye Almost Live Zoom. Special Spring Double Bill. Hosted by Amy Amantea. With special guests, Kate Stashko, Jane Barry, and Ingrid Turk.
So I want to officially welcome you all to the VocalEye Almost Live event. My name is Amy Amantea. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for VocalEye, your host for these events, and I'm a proud member of the blind community. And I just want to extend a big thank you to all of those of you in the community who've made donations and have supported us in many ways, including writing lovely letters. We just got a lovely letter of support from Ruth. So thank you, Ruth, for that. There's always a link that's posted in the chat if you feel like making a financial contribution. But as Ruth and Pierre have done in the past and a few others, writing a letter of support is super, super helpful to how we apply for funding in this space. So thank you all for doing that. If you happen to be watching this event on our YouTube channel, I please very much hope that you like and subscribe. That's great. And before we get into tonight's presentation, I want to invite Deanna into the space to do a land acknowledgement. So Deanna, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Amy. Hello, everyone. My name, as Amy said, is Deanna Jestrin. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an intern at VocalEye. My family comes from the St'át'imc Nation, which is near Lillooet, BC on my mother's side, and English Welsh descent on my father's side. VocalEye is presenting to you today from the ancestral traditional shared territories of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish First Nations. It is important to acknowledge these nations, to support them as they continue to fight to protect the land that we all live on, and strive to reestablish their cultural traditions that were devastated by 7 generations of attempted cultural genocide in Canada and the United States. My ancestors were both First Nations and white Canadian settlers. I have mixed cultural heritage, and I see this as a gift, especially now as historical truths are finally being shared and cultural and familial traumas are finally being acknowledged on a widespread stage. I believe that my mixed heritage background gives me a unique perspective from which I can offer information, build connections, and bridge communities. Much like a cultural career who uses language and communication to sort of clear overgrown pathways so the way forward can be easier and more peaceful. I'm nearing the end of my internship at VocalEye. It's hard to believe, but this will be my last weekly land acknowledgement. I'd like to express what an honor it has been to travel across this cultural space and cultural bridge to be with you each week, to share with you Indigenous history and information, and to foster awareness and connections through storytelling. Speaking with you about the importance of allyship is meant to highlight the large-scale tragedies of the past that cannot heal for Indigenous people without large-scale efforts to provide comfort, compassion, understanding, allyship, and a different way forward. Thank you so much for allowing me into your space, for being here with us each week. I want to say a special thank you also to VocalEye for the beautiful gifts that you offer this community. I've said it before, but I tell everybody about this organization because people need to know what a gift is being offered. And I thank you also for the incredible learning experiences that you've offered me over the past 6 months. I look forward to joining you all back in the space for an Indigenous Artist Showcase on May 11th, where Amy and I will be joined by Vancouver artists Renai Morisseau, Russell Wallace, and Carrie Tennant, who will be here to speak in the space about Indigenous art. To each of you, I lift my hands upward, bent 90 degrees at the elbow with flat palms facing forward, facing my face at eye level. And I say to you, all my relations, to acknowledge that we are all related. Thank you so much and have a great show.
Oh, thank you, Deanna. It's bittersweet. We've loved having you here. I know that this, we're going to see you again on May 11th in a whole other capacity, which is going to be so much fun. But please just know that you're welcome in this space anytime and every time you want to be here. It's been a real gift having you in this space as well.
Thank you so much, Amy.
So with that, friends, I also want to just update the community on something that's rather somber, and I'm sad to have to say it out loud. On Monday night, we lost a community member. Josette Kernahan passed away on Monday night. And so those of you who knew her well in the Vancouver area will mourn her and miss her. And those of you who got to know her in this space, the sentiment is to send well wishes and thoughts to her both her family and her found family of friends and community. We've loved having Josette in the theater personally, in person, and in this digital space, who always had really lovely things to offer. So I want to put it out into the space. I recognize that it may be shocking for some of you to hear that, but to acknowledge that Josette was a part of our community and will always be in our memories. So with that, I share that sad news with you all. Okay. Whew. So welcome, friends. It's another Wednesday. It's March the 23rd, 2022. And tonight is our Almost Live event number 77. That is 77. That seems like it should be like a winning bingo number or something. Tonight, we're offering you the special spring double bill. So what this looks like is a double feature, just like going to a movie theater and seeing two movies back to back. But we're going to start off tonight's presentation with a dance video called The Beginning of Happiness. And this dance film is from the Good Woman Dance Collective and Femme Vocal Quartet, and they're based out of Edmonton, and this is an audio described dance video. So we will speak to them in just a moment, but after we're done with witnessing the dance video and having a bit of a Q&A with the artists, we will turn our focus to our own describer, Ingrid Turk. And some of you may not know that Ingrid is a master gardener as well. And Ingrid's going to share with us a bit about the Cherry Blossom Festival here in Vancouver and its relationship to the Cherry Blossom Festival in Japan, and all about cherry blossom stuff. So I'm super interested to learn more about cherry blossoms. But before we get to that, I want to welcome into the space. We've got a couple of folks with us. We've got Kate with us, Kate Stashko, and I think I heard Jane Berry jump in too. I think we have both of you. Am I lying to myself, or have we got both of you tonight? I know we've got Kate, but I thought I heard somebody's screen reader say we had Jane, so maybe I'm wrong. But if Jane's in the space, she'll pop in a moment. So welcome, Kate. Welcome to the space. I want to start just by asking a bit about Good Women Dance Collective. And I've got a third square. That must mean Jane's with us as well. Welcome, Jane.
Hi.
So this is like this video is Good Women Dance Collective and Femme Quartet. Am I getting that right? So okay, first off, let's start with, what is Good Women Dance Collective? That
Sure.
sounds cool. And how long has the company been around?
Yeah. Good Women Dance Collective is a contemporary dance company based in Amiskasi, Waskahegan, which is also known as Edmonton. Mm-hmm. And for this project, we've been collaborating with Jane Berry, who is also here with us, and who is also part of Femme Vocal Quartet. And Jane is also the composer and co-director and producer of the film. But anyways, Good Women Dance Collective has been around since 2009, before I was even part of it. And it started as an opportunity for creating and producing new contemporary works with an aim to challenge and expand our audience here in the Edmonton area.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then what about the Femme Vocal Quartet, Jane? What is that all about? When did that start?
We started it about 3 years ago now. And it's a group that has really just wanted to carve out a space for female voices to be heard. Primarily, our original intent was really focusing on the choral world, which is quite white male dominated. So we started about 3 years ago, and this is our we've been working with Good Women now on this project for a solid 2 years, I think.
So this project has taken 2 years to come to fruition?
COVID, yeah.
COVID, of course, right. The giant elephant in the room. So talk to me a little bit. I'm not sure which one of you wants to start, but talk to me about like how this project came together. Was it something that, you know, I don't know, sparked in you and then you went for it and then COVID happened and you delayed it, or like, what was that process like?
Jane, do you want to start or do you want me to?
Sure, I'll start. We wanted to partner on this project, and originally it was meant to be a live performance. So four singers and 4 dancers. That was the original concept. And so we collaborated on the whole project, and we actually got shut down the day before our tech week.
Oh no.
Yeah, so we were a solid year pretty much into the project when we got shut down. And then we were fortunate enough to be able to get some funding to transition it into a film project, which we were all pretty excited about. It works hopefully really well for capturing all the different modalities that we were combining. And so we had to really kind of start from scratch and re-envision the project. And actually the original work is an hour long, but so we condensed it down to a half-an-hour film. And yeah, we got started on that project, and you'll see the fruition of the rest, I guess.
Oh, that pivot got so many of us, but I suppose it you know, it's the big silver lining, right, for artists is and I'm curious about whether either of you had any experience in terms of creating filmed like media content, because typically as you mentioned, Jane, like dance is in a physical space, you know. So was there a big learning curve to trying to figure that out, or?
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, Jane, I'm sure you can speak to this from your point of view as well, but Good Women has like very limited experience working in film. So it really was just being thrown into this medium that we were pretty unfamiliar with. But we were really lucky to have Tamara Lessard also as our director of photography, who brought a lot of expertise into that process. But the learning curve was steep. And I think that any comments or thoughts that folks have to share with us based on the experience of this film, I think are super valuable and welcome because of that.
We really wanted from the beginning to not have it be a live stream of a live performance.
Right.
So that was really a big goal of ours from the beginning. Trying to capture the storylines that run through the piece. And yeah, I think we were really excited about the opportunity that working in the medium of film presented us with, in order to focus more on storylines, since the audience isn't there and able to kind of choose their own trajectory throughout the piece as a whole. So
right. I don't, and you know, other community members can pipe in afterwards when we do our Q&A, but from a perspective of somebody who is listening to dance and not seeing dance, I actually really love it when a storyline is woven into the description piece, because it becomes a little bit of a storytelling narrative as opposed to just a list of movements that I have to make, like puzzle pieces that I need to assemble in my brain, right? Especially if I haven't witnessed, because some of us have had the privilege of sight in our lives and some of us have never seen. So if you've never seen a movement, what does that look like? And if you have, you know, how do you remember what it looks like? All those different things come into play. So I'm really interested to experience this with the group and maybe get you some feedback on that aspect of it as well. Just before we hit play, I want to ask quickly about the content of the piece, because it's I don't want to say quite serious, but I guess maybe that is the term to use. How would you describe that? And should we be aware of any content warning as we witness this?
Right. Yeah, definitely. It is the subject matter. It is about domestic violence. So it's based on my own personal experience, but I was trying to relate it to kind of broader lived experiences of misogyny. So definitely a content warning, especially in movement 9. It's a bit more graphic, very momentarily, but the lyrics of the song really tell the story. Yeah, so lived experience of misogyny. Let's put it that way.
It will not be unfamiliar to many a female or female presenting human in these spaces, right? And that also is very disheartening to actually have to say out of my mouth. But I know the reality of that. And I've experienced the reality of that myself. So I totally get that. So I'm interested and excited about being able to unpack this after we witness it, because I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about. And yeah, I think with that, maybe what we'll do is we'll just invite our guests to sit back. If you've got your headsets ready to go, you'll probably get a little bit of a cleaner audio experience with the description. Friends, sit back and enjoy. Rick, when you're ready, press play.
Due to copyright restrictions, excerpts of this presentation have not been recorded. Please check below for more information, including links to the material if it is hosted elsewhere.
Welcome back, friends. That was the beginning of happiness. We're going to welcome Jane and Kate back into the space for a little Q&A from our audience before we witness the Cherry Blossom Festival. So welcome back, Jane and Kate. I see some squares popping into the space. We've got some squares. So friends from the community, if you have questions or things that resonated with you, there's a lot of really impactful moments and sounds in this particular piece. Would really love for you to share your thoughts or ask questions of things that might have been missing for you in the audio description that you want a little more detail on. So let's maybe just start with this idea of audio description. I'm curious what prompted you to describe this particular piece.
Yeah, I think it's part of the attempts that Good Women Dance Collective is making to provide our work to as many folks as we can. So there's the described version of this film. There's also a version with captioning, because we've spoken about how it can be hard to catch all of the text that we're hearing in the vocals. And there's also an ASL version of the film as well. So we are new, I guess, neophytes to this element that we're working in, but we thought it was important to provide these different options for how folks might want to experience the film.
And so for either of you, had you ever experienced, working with a describer or the process of audio description? New to you both? Okay, so I'm curious. I know we have a couple of hands, friends. So I'm curious about what that process was like for you all, being newbies to the whole, thing. What things did you learn? What things did you discover? What things might you do differently next time? I don't know. I'm curious.
Jane, I'm sure you have a response to that, but I can say even just watching it again, experiencing it again just now, I have lots of thoughts about making it more of a collaborative process between the composer, the singers, the describer, and the dancers, because I think we could make better choices about the timing of how things were laid together. What needs to be heard or experienced at what moment, what can lay over top of something else, and what needs to stand by itself for a moment. Just the timing of introducing the different, the description, the audio, and the visual that's happening. Yeah.
What about for you, Jane? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I was trying to imagine, like I kept my eyes closed a fair bit of the time and tried to imagine from the description. I mean, I know what this film looks like and I know what the gestures. I think I'd say the same thing. Some of the gestures that were intentional and like had meaning, I probably would focus more on some of those. So some of those, like there were some gestures where like one was described as wiping hair off the face, but like the meaning was actually she was wiping blood from her mouth. Right. So like little descriptions, knowing the meaning, like, and having worked with the choreographers to try and bring out nuances from the story that also you can't really get from just the text alone anyway. So
I think that's a really important point that you mentioned, Jane, because it was something that I was missing, was like the intentions of movements, the quality, what maybe some of the emoting was from these women in the dance. And I understand that it's to some extent we ask a describer to make assumptions, but they are our eyes to this world. And so it's like, if a describer sees somebody smile, they may assume that they're happy, right? And that's okay. I'm okay with that. But knowing that you all had real specific intentions around some of these pieces, you're the perfect lens to be able to share what those are, so that they are imparted to those of us who don't maybe interpret those the same way. I would also say just a teeny note, and this is not an audio description review session, but I found, because the music is so beautiful, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and the movements from the little bit of movement that I can see are so sort of well, I don't know, feels sort of well oiled in a way. I don't know how to describe that, but the narrator's voice was very not in fitting with what I wanted to feel from this film. So I kept being pulled out of those moments. And anyway, so that's, you know, as we grow in audio description, we learn, right? So we've got some hands, we've got Megan, and then we've got Lori. So let's go Megan first. Give Megan a chance to unmute. And then Lori, you'll be on deck.
That was amazing. Sorry, I missed some of it, but when I got onto, really beautiful. That was awesome. Who were the singers that were doing it? That were singing? That was beautiful.
Well, we're called Femme Vocal Quartet, but the four of us, it's four professional singers from Edmonton. Myself, Jane Barry, Dawn Bailey is the second. The highest voice that you would have heard is Dawn Bailey. The second highest voice is Amy Voyer. Then the next voice is mine, that's Jane Barry, and then the lowest voice that you heard was Sable Chan.
So what's the group called again? You're part of the Femme Quartet?
Femme, Femme, Femme
Vocal Quartet.
Yep.
Okay, I'll definitely look that up. Thank you so much.
Can we find you on iTunes or Spotify, or just purchase your music?
So this album was just released, but it's actually the full version, the hour-long work. We just released it on Bandcamp in conjunction with the film. Yeah,
Bandcamp is something we'd love to.
And were you dancing as well as singing?
We were in it. Originally, when we made the piece, it was so collaborative with the 8 of us in this space. And so the movement, we were a bit more involved in the movement, but in the film version, we played the role more of characters. We were involved in it, but I wouldn't say we were dancing as much as moving.
Okay, that was beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. That's awesome.
Thanks, Megan. Lori, you're up.
I thought it was really well done, and I did put my headphones in, and I see why you suggested that, Amy, to do that. I think I kind of agree with Amy a little bit. There could have been a little bit more emotions with the describer on some of the points on the movements of what the ladies were doing, and everything, because I've seen a lot of plays described and everything through my years, and I did, since it's still new to you guys, I think this may be a little bit more reaction to what's going on, to what the person is describing to us.
Yeah, I know that at the end of the day, when we think about description, it's, does it serve the listener? Does it serve the work? Right? These are the two things that we constantly remind ourselves of.
I know it's hard to learn all this since it's the first time you guys.
It's a growing process. It's a learning process. So, and I don't, we don't know who this describer is. I mean, you could tell us, but or how familiar they are with the dance genre versus other genres of description, right? Because there's all sorts of genres.
Yes. As soon as it started, I thought, shoot, I forgot to say what I wanted to say about the description that was happening there. So the description was provided by Inside Out Theater's Good Host program. So it's Inside Out Theater, It's their Good Host program, and it was described by Kat Germain. And
who was the narrator?
Kat Germain.
She narrated it as well. It didn't sound to me like Kat. I know Kat quite well. It didn't sound to me like Kat. So
okay,
I missed that. All right, there you go.
I'll just say it was a very good performance and everything. And
let's talk a bit about the music. Because I'm curious. I know, Jane, obviously you're heavily involved in the music creation. What came first in this piece? Does the music influence the movement? Does the movement influence the music? How does that process work?
Well, I mean, for me, obviously, like, the story is very personal for me, and I am a singer and a musician and a composer. So I would be lying to say that, like, the dance came first. But at the same time, when we were working on this, I was literally, I mean, the full thing is 27 movements long, and I was rolling out new compositions. So in rehearsal with the dancers. So the dancers were really involved from the very beginning in the conversations of exploring the music. And so I think that the two really did influence each other. Also, because in the original conception, us as singers, we were physically being moved by the dancers so much that I do think that the feeling of embodying it did change how I think we interpreted the music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense. Kate, got any more you want to unpack about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jane that it was quite interwoven, but I mean, truthfully, this is Jane's story, and Jane is the composer, and Jane approached Good Women with this work already very much brewing.
Mm-hmm.
And you could probably speak to that more, Jane, but certainly that was the seed came from Jane and her composition of this score. But I agree that once we got in the room together, there was a lot of back and forthing between how the movement was informing the singers and the other way around, of course.
Yeah.
And Jane, you had thrown out the term choral earlier. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, for folks who don't know what choral is, maybe you can share with us what that is.
Well, the four of us each perform as, like, professional singers. Mm-hmm. And we all knew each other from working jobs together prior to coming together and forming FEM. So we all have a lot of different experiences in the choral world. So none of us, though, however, really in a super traditional sense. I do very, like, I've worked with Kate on some extremely avant-garde pieces. And then we all sing in a group called Pro Coro that is well known in the choral world for doing very, very high level, but also very contemporary choral works. Mm. So yeah, a cappella singing really is where we come from.
And a little bit like a choir.
Yeah, we all sing in choirs, lots of different choirs together, but primarily we know each other first and foremost from Pro Coro. And actually, this piece, though, didn't exist in my mind just as I always had dance envisioned, because actually the first time I ever worked with Good Women was on a project called Love Fail. And it was the same, it was 4 dancers and 4 singers for that as well. And that work, I think, my experience had happened prior to performing that work with Good Women. Mm-hmm. And so I think I really had them in mind for this as an integral part of the project from conception.
Right. When you're recording this type of music, are you all in a space together, or are you recording individually and then layering it, or how does that work?
Well, we recorded this through the meat of COVID. And so we were really, really fortunate. Another person, also a colleague from Pro Coro, who's a fantastic, he runs his own studios called Silver Studios. So we all knew him and had a very trusting relationship. with him. And he actually came forward and said, given the mandate of both of your organizations, am I the person that should be doing this? And so he actually took on and mentored a young woman throughout the process in his own accord, which I thought was really fantastic. Like true kind of allyship.
Yeah, that's how you use your privilege.
Exactly. And so we layered each of these parts. So we, over the course of several months, went in individually and chipped away at one movement after the other, and layered it. Originally in the live performance, though, a lot of the spoken parts were actually performed by the dancers.
Oh. Yeah.
So they were involved in the audio, and we were involved in the music to a little bit of a different, in different ways in the original conception.
Right. So that's the original conception. Is there a plan then to perform this live, or has that happened?
I think we would all love to. But
well, there's still time. I'm curious about the theme of water in this particular piece. There seems to be a lot of that. There's a lot of nature. You know, it's shot outdoors. That's probably a pivot. The pandemic, of course, to be able to have to, you know, not be in an enclosed space. But there's a lot of very nature naturalistics and a lot of water themes, and I wonder how that relates to the storytelling, the visual storytelling, I suppose, for folks who may not have noticed that there was so much.
So it actually, I think, would have been easier and logistically certainly easier for us to do it all in the theater, but the actual connection to the outdoors is just where this main big event, where like the main assault happened for me. And so we really tried to find a location that as mirrored that as closely as possible.
Right.
And so that was actually the connection to the outdoors. And during the assault, I had my mouth and nose held shut, and for a very long time. And so I really struggled in the years since with, I love the water deeply, but it brings back a lot of anxiety. And part of when I was trying to get away, I actually went to Australia. So actually one of the scenes that Kate is the solo dancing in, called Under the Water, takes place for me in Australia. And I really struggled while I was there because I love the ocean. I've always been a water baby. And so I was in the water every day, but I was kind of constantly having anxiety attacks, and the feeling of not being able to breathe really brought that back and has brought that back over the years. And so actually you didn't get to hear the very last line of the final movement, but the final line of the movement is actually, in the water, I'll hold my breath on my own. So I kind of like am taking ownership, and that's why we're back in the water again, but I'm not laying lifeless in the water. I'm like engaging, and I'm kind of reclaiming that space. So it was a pretty important aspect of like the nuance kind of my experience, I guess.
And I mean, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that in this space. I think it takes a lot to be able to reflect on those things, because you have to kind of compartmentalize that in your own brain to protect yourself, right? That's a real thing. What is your hope that audiences take away from this piece for both of you? Like, is it a real literal thing that you want them to take away, or, you know, I'm just gonna let you answer the question.
Well, personally for me, part of the process, part of what I've learned about myself is that as a composer, I primarily use composition as a processing tool. It's kind of like, once I can go through it and articulate it and figure it out, that is entirely cathartic for me. And then I kind of feel like it is kind of compartmentalizing as well, because I turn it, you know, I put it into a thing, and and then I can reflect on it. I can almost gain as close to being objective on it as I think is ever possible. And a little bit of detachment as well. Once that's like, okay, I've gone through it, I've processed. But part of one of the movements that's not in this piece, but that was like a pivotal movement when we first started working on it, the he said, she said one, Kate. You know, some of the lyrics and the movements that didn't make it into the film version are really like kind of very intentionally combating some of the stereotypes around domestic violence. Like, I wasn't an idiot. I wasn't some weak little girl. I was strong. I was smart. It's not always like the Hollywood version, right? He wasn't, you know, he had lots of good things. He was everything I wanted, which is a lyric, you know, and then something happened. I'll never really understand, I don't think.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, I was treated very differently, like very suddenly. It was very interesting because when I grew up, my mother ran a homeless shelter for battered women and children, actually. And so I'd always been around it. And then all of a sudden to be like othered in this very particular way was very strange experience. And I think that even when we have the best of intentions, we still have this like, we still have all these stereotypes that we're just so used to. And so there are parts of the work that I really intentionally tried to challenge those thoughts. And then other times where I was like, I'm going to allow myself to have this memory and not feel guilty for the fact that I'm allowed to remember that it wasn't all horrible, you know,
Right.
Leading up until this, I'm allowed to remember that as a beautiful memory. And yeah, it was a lot of personal processing.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for sharing that. Kate, for you, is there something in particular that you're thinking that audiences, or I guess hoping, or I don't know?
Yeah. I mean, hoping is one of the words that's in my mind. I think that, of course, this is not my personal story, but I am hoping that something that gets taken away from this is hope and empowerment in some way, because this is difficult. It's difficult to experience this film, I think, for many of us. It's difficult. It's been challenging for Jane and for many of the cast to delve into some of these memories or ideas. And I would hope that after going through some, you know, the challenge of making it and experiencing it, that we end with something empowering. And also that, like Jane touched on this, the hope that it creates some dialogue and that it creates it sort of promotes some conversation about a topic that we tend to kind of just squash,
bury under the rug,
everything, and like try to pretend that that's not around, because it's tough to address it like head on or even sideways. So yeah, I hope that it creates some conversations.
And you know, to be honest, how hard women are on women in some of these situations. You know, Jane, you mentioned feeling othered, and it's like sometimes that comes from folks that really should be the primary ally, right? They have the same, you know, maybe gender lived experience, maybe not, but you know, there's that, you expect there to be this rallying cry around you, and sometimes that cry is broken by people that you're like, wait, how do you not get this? Right. So that kind of idea that we could be maybe kinder and gentler to each other in moments like this, instead of being maybe re-victimizing people when they're already in a space that they're experiencing that. So friends, if you've got any final questions for Kate or for Jane in the space, we invite them at this moment. Any thoughts on what you've experienced tonight? Because I think I would like to watch this several more times, because I think, you know, just experiencing it once is not enough to get the full impact, right? Like certainly I have an initial impact, but I think that there are so many details that, I don't know, sometimes I think my brain can't process it all at the same time. And I feel like I need to go through again and be like, okay, I'm going to focus on this moment this time, and then I'm going to focus on this moment at this time, and really feel what resonates for me truly in those moments. I see another hand from Megan. Megan, is that the same hand you had before, or do you have another question or thought? Give Megan a moment to unmute.
Can you send me a video of that? That's really beautiful. It sounded almost Celtic in a way when I go, if only she, you know, like it sounded really Celtic. Could you send me that video of that? It's so beautiful. I love it. It's so nice. Thank you so much.
If we're able to reshare it, there will be a link in the follow-up email. So
all right, thank you.
Leave that to us to discuss and after this session, and we'll figure those pieces out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. All right, friends. I mean, that's how fast time flies. Thank you both so much for joining us in this space and for sharing this beautiful work, being so open and vulnerable about your experience, Jane. That's been really wonderful. And I wonder what's next for you both. Are you collaborating something else together or taking a break?
I'm sure we'll be working together soon.
The cogs in the brain are working on what grant we can write to get funding to do what project. The bane of every artist, right? Oh, I need to write another grant.
Well, right now I'm thinking about this, the described version of this film, and I have like so many new informations that came from this. So that's my brain right now, and I really want to pull that thread. So I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who's here tonight, and to Jane and Amy and Steph, everyone at VocalEye, for inviting us and for being open with your experiences of it, because it's so valuable and helpful. So yeah, thank you a lot for having us.
Oh, we're so pleased to have you in the space, and please come back and join us sometime when you've got pieces to share, and we'd love to revisit some of the work that you all do. So with that, friends, I will invite you to enjoy your evening, and we're going to move on to the second half of our double bill tonight. So with our thanks to Jane and to Kate, we'll say goodbye, good evening, so long, farewell. I'm not a trained singer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Kate. And we're going to welcome Ingrid Turk into the space. And just wait for Ingrid to pop up. And we're going to have a little chat about, there's Ingrid. How are you?
Hi, you guys. I'm good. That was very,
I was just going to say, what was your
beautiful
experience?
It was dark and beautiful.
Yeah, I gravitate to the dark and twisty stuff. There's something about dark and twisty that I don't know, that I love to experience. Not really sure why.
Your inner goth.
You know, I was a goth. I was.
Oh, well then.
So maybe dark and twisty is just my jam. But anyway, so yes, I love witnessing those kinds of pieces of work because they really get conversations going. Mm-hmm. But speaking of conversation, this is a kind of a going from the dark and twisty to the old growth, pink and bushy, still kind of twisty, but more twisty limbs on a tree. So what are you going to share with us? We're going to talk about the Vancouver Cherry Blossom Festival, not?
Yeah, and cherry blossoms in general, because we're, just in the past few days, they've begun to bloom, the earlier ones. And so I thought I'd talk about the history of Japanese cherry blossom festivals, how we celebrate it in Vancouver. Just some kind of nuts and bolts isn't quite the right word, but information about the trees themselves. Mm-hmm. And then I have some resources that I know Steph is going to send out as links, but I can talk about those a little bit too.
So where are we going to start, Ingrid? I know you got some photos as well for those of us who have some partial that may get some benefit of some what cherry blossom trees are, some of the close-ups of the blossoms, because I've never been up and close to a cherry blossom. They're so high up on the tree that I never see them. Mm-hmm.
Well, Rick, could you show us picture number 1, which is the tree and fence, please? So this is kind of a quintessential Japanese sakura image. Sakura is cherry blossoms, and they're very important and symbolic in Japanese culture. They've been celebrated since the 8th century. And at that time, farmers believed that gods came to hide in these trees in the springtime. And so they made offerings at the foot of the trees so that they would have a good harvest. Nowadays, the more contemporary symbolism of the trees is the end of winter. And because the blossoms are so beautiful and fleeting, they symbolize the impermanence of beauty. So
Ingrid, before you go on, could you maybe describe to us what this tree looks like?
Yes, oh, of course. So it's very dark bark, clearly a very old tree. It's got a broad trunk. I couldn't get my arms around it, but two of me could. And you can see the roots that stabilize it, reaching into the ground. They're the same color as the bark of the tree. And then the trunk lifts up into three sort of main large limbs. And those twist and branch ever further out and ever further up. And every branch has clusters of pale pink cherry blossoms. In this picture, there's so many of them. They look almost like a blur against the dark bark of the tree. And there's a rustic wooden fence and a little golden leaved hedge behind it, which complement the colors of the cherry blossoms and emphasize the natural aspect of celebrating these.
It kind of, I don't know if I'm going to describe this correctly, but I feel like if I were to hold my hand with my fingers towards the ceiling and just kind of like, I don't know, twist it as if I was holding a tennis ball.
Yes.
That's kind of the shape of the base of that tree. You know, the really thick stump with the lesser thick branches, and then the really tiny, like capillary branches coming off the top. But it's really kind of wild and wicked looking.
It is, and yet it's in this groomed landscape.
Yeah.
Which is part of the Japanese aesthetic as well.
And almost very bonsai looking, even though it's not a miniature plant, but it kind of has the shape of.
Japanese flowering cherries lend themselves really well to bonsai.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised to hear that, actually.
No. The festival is called Hanami, and it's all about laying out your picnic blanket under a canopy of cherry blossoms and having a picnic, busting out the sake partway through the afternoon, waiting until it gets dark, drinking until it gets dark, waiting till the special lights get put on the cherry trees, and then getting rowdy, basically. So
sounds like a good old time.
Yeah,
that's how they celebrate in Japan, is what you're saying.
That's how they celebrate in Japan. Yeah, in the morning they send the young ones out, usually with a plastic tarp or something, to stake out a spot in the park, just like the folk festival. And then later along come the elders with their picnics and thermoses of sake.
And do we know what region in Japan these festivals are popular, or where these trees mostly grow?
I can tell you that it is all over Japan, that there's actually a cherry blossom trail that you can follow from south to north as the trees come into bloom over about a 4-week period. You can travel with the blossoms, basically.
What is that time of year, Ingrid? That 4 weeks?
It's this time of year.
In Japan too?
In Japan too, yeah.
Because the climates are different, but they blossom at the same time.
Yeah, their blossoming starts a little bit earlier than ours down on the South Island. Pardon me. And they actually have a cherry blossom forecast, a daily cherry blossom forecast, like a weather forecast, telling, constantly adjusting the timing. Oh, it looks like the cherry blossoms in Hokkaido are going to be a little bit later than we thought. So, adjust your travel plans accordingly.
I love that.
Yeah.
Travel plans accordingly. Love it.
Yeah. Plum blossoms are quite popular too, especially with the older people, because those parties aren't as rowdy, apparently.
Hmm.
Hmm.
How does it differ in Vancouver here when we do the Cherry Blossom Festival? How did we even get cherry blossoms in Vancouver?
How do we get them?
Where did they're
Where
not
did they come from?
indigenous? Yeah, they're not
No,
indigenous. How did they
no.
get here?
They started off as gifts. In the 30s, the mayors of Kobe and Yokohama presented the Parks Board with 500 Japanese flowering cherries. Some of them were for planting at the Japanese Cenotaph in Stanley Park. And then another 300 were planted in the 50s around Oppenheimer Park and in East Vancouver. The Japanese consul gave them as a gift as an eternal memory of good friendship between our two nations.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'll think of that next time I'm around a cherry blossom.
And it turned out that they were incredibly popular with the residents of Vancouver because they're so beautiful. And then the Parks Board Tree Committee, or whatever they are, discovered that they are really good street trees too, as all of the elms and the poplars and the maples that had been planted very early in Vancouver's growth, as they became problematic and had to be taken out, they started replacing them with these more compact, controllable trees. These ones don't heave the sidewalks that much, not like the elm trees do. They're not as plagued with pests as some of those big trees. So in Vancouver, the first time they ever did an inventory of Vancouver trees wasn't until 1990, but at that time, 13% of the trees were the bright pink Kwanzan flowering cherry, and 12% are flowering plums, which is so interesting to me. Steph
So you're
said
telling me that we could easily mistake a cherry blossom tree from a plum blossom tree?
We could, and it was Steph that twigged this for me, said something about the confusion between plums and cherries, and I was like, yeah, now that you say that, I am confused.
I have to tell you, because we in our yard here in Vancouver had a cherry tree and a plum tree. Both of them had to be cut down because of disease eventually.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever paid any difference to the flowers on those trees. I think I was just sort of like, yep, they're there, they're beautiful, have a nice day. And you know what I mean? I never really paid that much attention to them. And now that they're not in my yard, I miss them.
I bet.
And they both bore fruit.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah. So do these typical cherry blossom trees that we see bear fruit?
If they do, it's small and bitter and beloved only by the birds.
Gotcha. Not for human consumption.
Yeah. So in Vancouver, it's the plum trees that blossom first, and their blossoms are they're the same size and shape as cherry blossoms, so it's easy to be confused, right? But the bark of the tree is quite different, and plums are more highly scented than cherries. The cherry trees have a subtler scent than the plums do.
And maybe before we just jump into the next photo, because I know we've got a couple of them.
Yeah.
Can you just finish up by telling us about the Vancouver Cherry Blossom Festival itself? And,
yes,
and, you know, do people still do the tradition that they do in Japan, where they throw their blankets at the base of the trees and have a little party or leave gifts at the trees?
There's informal celebrations like that, but the Vancouver Cherry Blossom Festival throws organized events. Some really fascinating looking ones. I know in the past they've had events at Van Dusen Gardens. I don't see that's happening this year, but they do guided walks. They do self-guided walks. Yeah, they have a cherry blossom tree finder on their website, so that you can go and see you can find out what's in bloom right now and where are they located. And there's a map too of where to see Vancouver cherry trees. And there are a lot. I was amazed at how many there are now.
So how many cherry trees do you think there are?
Well, it's hard to say in Vancouver because nobody's been really counting them. There's a spreadsheet, but I didn't have time to do the count.
What about varieties? Because I hear there's like
there are 300. There are about 300 varieties of flowering cherries, and probably 20 of them are the most popular. And we certainly have at least 20 varieties represented in Vancouver.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can tell you that, like, for example, at the Burrard SkyTrain station, they have a particularly beautiful cherry called Akabono, which is, those branches attain a weeping spread. And so the blossoms sort of cascade along the branches of the tree, and they're a blossom that gets more and more pink before they fall. Other flowering cherries usually get paler and paler as time goes on before they lose their petals.
Okay, well, we've got a few other photos to get through, Ingrid.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you say?
So let's look at photo at number 2, which is a very, this is the quintessential cherry blossom, the Sakura. It's 5 petals. These ones look like they're white. The texture is like very fine tissue paper. And they have a cluster of actually quite stiff stamens in the center, each with a little ball of yellow pollen on the end, and then a long pistil in the middle, a long green pistil in the middle, which would catch the pollen to fertilize the flower.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a telltale for a cherry blossom, is that they have a little notch at the top of the petal. And
oh, you know what that reminds me of? This is again.
Yeah, what?
I don't know why these random things pop in my head, but it reminds me of what they say to do in a design show when you've got a throw cushion on your couch.
Oh,
You're
yes.
supposed to hit it on the top and put a dent in it.
Put
That's
a
what these
little dent in
petals
it.
are like. It's like you just took your little hand and you chopped it, and
Yeah.
there's a little dent in the top.
Yeah, exactly.
Try it on your pillows tonight, folks. Just hit them in the middle, and they got a little crease in the middle.
So let's look at the next 40, the Kansan cherry, Rick, if you could show us that. This is the most ubiquitous cherry tree here in Vancouver, and it's a fully double blossom, which means it has up to 20 petals. It's very pink. You can see the buds are about the size of the head of a Q-tip. They're almost red, they're so bright. And then as the flower opens, the pink gets paler and paler until at the end of the season, they'll be practically white by the time the petals begin to fall. And if we could spread out one of these petals, which are very sort of ruffled and frilly, if we could spread one out, we would see that there was a notch where we expected it to see. But really, they're like pom-poms almost.
Yeah, I was thinking about what's the other flower that's got a shape like that, like a carnation.
Exactly.
But yeah, that pom-pom idea is like a little pink, cotton candy pom-pom.
And so a cluster of them, because they grow in clusters on the trees, a cluster of them, it looks like quite a large pom-pom.
Right.
Yeah. So, that's an idea of the variation in the blossoms from the very, very simple to the more complex. There's another even more complex blossom in this called a chrysanthemum, but those are considered gaudy and in poor taste.
Really? Why is that?
I don't know. They offend the Japanese aesthetic for some reason.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I talked a little bit about the scent of plum blossoms. The cherry blossoms are faint and subtle, but it's a bit like the scent of crushed almonds, which makes sense because they're in that plant family. And some of the sweeter ones smell like freesia, which I haven't smelled those ones. I've smelled freesia, and I would love to stand under a cherry tree that smelled like freesia. Wow. It's a little bit sweet and spicy. I asked for some other opinions on what cherry blossoms smell like, and someone told me they smell like chopped carrots.
Chopped carrots. Isn't that interesting? Well, you know what? To some extent, I could maybe envision that, because chopped carrots, or carrots in general, have that sweet, earthy kind of smell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
Yeah.
can totally get that. Yeah. And then, so these ones that you're showing us now, they will turn white before they fall off the tree.
That's right.
How long does that cycle take typically?
It can take 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the weather. It could go even 4. In Vancouver, once the blossoms are beginning to deteriorate, it does not take much wind to flutter them from the trees. And it's very, very, it's reminiscent of snowfall.
Yeah, they cover the ground like snow. They do.
Yeah, they do. Which is, when they're pale pink, is lovely, but when they're the bright pink, it's a little bit like, whoa. That's a big contrast to the green grass. I had some friends who, on my birthday's in early May, when I was in theater school, they filled my car with fallen cherry blossom petals, like knee deep.
That's quite a prank.
It's quite a prank. And I was cleaning cherry blossom petals out of my car for years after that.
The hidden ones that get down in between the cushions. Yes, of course.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, but it was a sweet memory, you know.
Well, I mean, that sort of solidifies for me how you know the smell so well.
Yes, definitely.
The natural car scent booster.
Yeah. So the Vancouver Cherry Blossom Festival, they're presenting some events, including dance and music, and I think a couple of organized picnics. And I think Van Dusen does something special on its own to celebrate the cherries. We might find out about that when we go there in a couple of weeks to check things out for our almost live. Yeah, our reconnaissance. That's right. What else can I tell you? I can tell you where the earliest cherries that bloom in Vancouver are dark pink single flowers, and they're called Whitcomb, which is not a Japanese name, but it must be the name of the arborist who developed that variety. And they're the ones at Science World and Lost Lagoon. You can find those ones.
So wearing your master gardener hat, how do you develop a variety of flower? Somebody taught me this about apples once, so I'm curious about if it's the same process.
It is. It's exactly the same. You hybridize them. You know, you with trees, fruit plants very rarely come true from seed. So most trees are created by grafting. You know, you take some of the flowering stalk or the fruit stalk and you graft it onto a sturdier, hardier cherry trunk that can survive the winters. But the only way you get to create new ones is by crossbreeding them. And so that can be, it's totally painstaking. And it takes years and years to come up with a new variety. But, you know, they've been doing it since the 8th century. So they've had quite a bit of time too.
And you do that from when the tree is a sapling, or? mean, obviously you can't graft, or maybe you can, I don't know. But the tree that we saw in the first image that was huge and old and whatever, that seems harder to me to graft than a young tree where you could, you know, somehow.
You graft them when they're young, for
Yeah,
sure.
so you could like cut the trunk down the center and put two trunks from two
Exactly.
different trees together, wrap them up, and then hope they stick.
Yeah, and most grafts are done at about 5 foot height. And so that there's lots of Vancouver flowering cherry trees. You see have this kind of bumpy collar about 5 feet up the trunk. And out of the collar grows, you know, grows the canopy of branches. That collar is the point where the graft healed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I need you to come over to my house and explain this to my family, because I was telling them the other night about this being how they create different varieties of apples.
Yeah.
And nobody believed me. And I was like, I'm telling you, it's true. So now Ingrid has to come over and explain this to my family.
Okay. Will there be pizza and beer?
That's right. Whatever you want will be here, Ingrid.
Okay.
Whatever you want will be here.
Cool.
Apples. We'll have apples.
Oh, right. Cherry cider, maybe.
Ooh.
Yeah. So the hot spots in Vancouver for cherry blossoms, for experiencing them, smelling them, feeling them, are Kitts Beach Park, especially west of the Kitts Showboat. Does that make sense? Can you sort of?
No, and folks who aren't from the area aren't going to be able to.
They won't. That's right.
Figure that out either.
Well, I'll go through these hotspots and then I'll talk about other famous festivals. Granville Island is a good spot, especially down at the end where the park with the hill is.
And Granville Island is where we experienced the literary cabaret the other week.
Right. So it's at that end of the island that the cherry trees are. And there's wedding after wedding in front of the marina there. Got the marina and the cherry blossoms. It's pretty cool. The West End and Stanley Park are full of flowering cherries, and the Japanese War Memorial especially features flowering cherries. And also between down by the Rose Garden, there's a rarer variety of flowering cherry that might be worth checking out. In East Vancouver, as I said, Oppenheimer Park, and that part of Vancouver that used to be populated with Japanese businesses and homes, has lots of flowering cherry trees there. And Van Dusen Botanical Garden, that's another big hot spot. If we let's look at the next picture, Rick, the cherry blossom branch. This is just an example of how vivid the colors can be. These are single cherry blossoms, so just 5 petals, but ranging from a rose color to a pale pink. These are the ones that go from bright to light before they lose their blossoms. And they're clustered along a twig there. You can see the leaves just starting to emerge from buds just above or below the clusters of flowers. And these clusters of flowers are quite tight to the branch. Other flowering cherries, the clusters kind of droop or cascade. Which is,
you can see why they're so popular at things like weddings and maybe baptisms and things like that, because they're very beautiful, and in some regards remind me a tad bit of an orchid.
I get that. Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think it's this idea of this really skinny branch with a flower on it. That kind of, even though the branch itself is populated like from end to end, not just at the top. So you're kind of, you've got these flowers that are kind of budding off of this branch. It's almost like twiggy branch, like it's a really skinny branch.
It is a twig.
So the flowers are very prominent.
There are varieties of flowering cherries where the blossoms are presented like wands. Yeah,
I can see that for sure.
Other famous cherry blossom festivals include Washington, D.C., massive festival in Washington, D.C. Bonn in Germany, Edinburgh in Scotland. Paris is developing their own Japanese flower blossom festival. So they grow all over the world, but as you pointed out, they're not native to anywhere but Japan.
So because they grow all over the world, does that make them I guess maybe a hardy, sustainable type of plant? Because it doesn't sound like these places all have such different climates, right?
They are. It depends on which of the 300 varieties. Some are more tender than others, some are tougher than others. Some, like ours in Vancouver, benefit from being grafted onto a hardy but ugly cherry tree stock. And so, yeah, I would imagine there's a flowering cherry for almost every growing zone in the world, except maybe the Arctic and the and the deserts. So the last picture is a street view of a famous street in Vancouver, in East Vancouver, which used to be like a best kept secret until the internet came along. And so this is Van Ness Street, between Rupert Street and Earls. So kind of in the, I don't know what that neighborhood is. Is that the Sunrise neighborhood, Collingwood? It's in there. And so looking towards the sunset along the street, there are cherry trees along both sides of the street, sort of forming almost a kissing canopy over the road, which in the sunset is sort of blue and purple. And the cars look like they're placed there deliberately. They're so kind of evenly and yet seemingly randomly spaced. It's very photogenic. And so the trees that are closest to us, we can see how translucent the petals are because the sunset is shining through them. The sun just shines
right through them.
Yeah. And then as you go further down the hill and into the distance, the two lines of trees kind of merge into one. And it just depending how the light is falling, it's either a sort of orangey pink almost, and then in the shadows it's a purpley pink. It's very evocative.
And do we know what variety this is? Any guesses based on your master gardener experience?
This looks like Kansan cherry tree to me.
Okay, so we've seen this, we've witnessed this blossom already tonight.
Yeah.
Awesome. These trunks seem to be much skinnier than the first one.
Well, these trees are much younger than the first one.
Ah, that's what it is. Okay.
Right. These were probably only planted in the 50s. That first one is hundreds of years old.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a lot of stuff to know about cherry blossoms, Ingrid, and you've held our hand beautifully. I before we do, open it up to questions and answers and stuff from the audience, and I hope folks have questions about either the festival or cherry blossoms or whatnot. I want to let folks know that the prize draw tonight is actually something that everybody can access. So we've got cherry blossom tea. So if you would like to experience cherry blossom tea, this will go out on the email as well, the post email. So keep that handy for the information. But you're going to email Sarah, SARAH, at vocaleye.ca and just request some tea. Send Sarah your mailing address, and Sarah will pop you some cherry blossom tea into the mail, and you can enjoy some cherry blossom tea. And Sarah's going to join us maybe a little bit later and share with us what that tastes like, because I think she's been sampling it in the background while we've been enjoying the presentation. So friends, if you've got questions of Ingrid or cherry blossoms or gardening or any of those things, I think I see a thumbs up from, there's Sarah. Sarah's giving a thumbs up. But now's your chance to jump in and ask Ingrid, because anything you want to know about gardening, I think Ingrid can probably answer.
And this is the time of year.
This is the time of year. Are you planting your gardens already?
I'm starting seeds, yes, and I'm amending the soil by digging compost into my garden bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to get on top of the pruning. The housing co-op where I live has a lot of landscaping that's been neglected, and so all of the shrubs and trees need some TLC just to take out, dead branches, things like that.
Well, they got just the resident to do that.
Yep.
So I see we've got a hand from Tammy and then a hand from Lori. So let's go to Tammy.
Hi, Ingrid. Thank you for the presentation about the cherry blossoms.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm from Ontario, so when I first moved to Vancouver, or even whenever I used to come and visit Vancouver before, in the spring, I would smell this interesting smell that I could not smell anywhere else in the country. And somebody told me it was the cherry blossoms. I'm not sure if that's exactly true, if there are other smells out there too, but it's just something I'll always remember. And it's just what draws me to being in Vancouver here. It's just the beautiful smells in the springtime, which, they're just so different from anywhere else in the country where I've lived or where I've visited. So I just thought I would comment on that. I don't know.
Tammy, how would you describe the smell? Because it's
almost like a sweet perfumey kind of smell that I would smell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely a sweet kind of smell. I don't even know if it's really perfumey or what, but it is like a sweet smell. Yeah, but it was just something that I just never smelled anywhere else, and it just really, I think I'll always remember that. And I just love this time of year, like April, when they start to really smell everywhere,
Yeah.
And I live not far from like Granville Island and some of the places where you talk about. So I think here in Kitsilano, I think we smell them quite a lot.
I know Vancouver is really lucky that in that we have enough masses of them that we can be really aware of the scent.
Yeah.
And I think cherry blossoms too are the kind of thing, like, there's lots of tattoos that people have that are cherry blossoms.
Yes.
And I think there are lots of like, I didn't know there was cherry blossom tea, but obviously there is. And I bet you if you look hard enough, there's a cherry blossom perfume. I bet you there is.
Oh, I'm sure.
So it's the kind of thing that gets printed on t-shirts, like silk screened. And so the images are really powerful, and just about any sighted person who sees them knows what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty iconic. Lori, go ahead and either ask your question or share your comment.
I was going to say, I know what cherry blossoms feel like.
Yeah.
Because, I've been around them. They feel kind of nice, but I need her gardening skills to come over here because I have a black thumb, and I kill anything if I plant. I have a plant on my patio, and I have to say, okay, when does it need to be watered? Because you
have to set a notification, Lori.
Yeah, I forget it's out there. And
oh yeah.
So my parents were wonderful growers of plants and flowers, and they had the green thumbs in the family.
Hard act to follow, aren't they?
Yeah. So, but my brother-in-law has wouldn't say it's a garden. He's got fruit and vegetables that he's growing on like almost a half an acre of land.
Wow, that's like practically a farm.
Yeah, he's growing all kinds of stuff for to can with and everything. And he's another one that's got the green thumb. I know, it's like I tell him I'll come and feel everything, but don't ask me to grow anything for him.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you get jam and I don't know, applesauce at Christmas time or something.
I haven't gotten that, but I do like. I haven't smelled a cherry blossom because we don't really get a lot of cherry blossoms here in Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of hard to find,
Peach blossoms, maybe peach and apricot blossoms.
Yeah. I like the smell. I love fresh peaches, and so does my dog. Sleep on the floor. He loves
my favorite things: fresh peaches, just a spoonful of vanilla ice cream.
Oh no, I cut them up and put them in my parfaits that I eat. They're just,
Yogurt, yeah, it's all good.
I like the ones where you have to lean over the kitchen sink to eat them.
Yeah. And then your shirt has to go in the laundry basket afterwards.
Yeah.
That's my life anyways. We've got a hand from Joanna and then a hand from Ruth. So go ahead, Joanna. Give Joanna a moment to unmute.
There we go. I unmuted twice.
Ah, we gotcha.
Double lucky. Ingrid, thank you for such an interesting presentation. Am I remembering correctly that you described one species of cherry blossom as having petals that go from light to dark and another one that goes from dark to light as it ages?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating. I don't know.
It is, isn't it?
Any more science behind that you can share with us of why it does that? Why there's such a difference, rather?
That's a good question. I don't know why. I believe it has to do with anthocyanins.
Oh,
maybe.
There you go. I'm impressed. No, I was just thinking that in the fall, everything loses its pigment, or I guess the pigment changes rather.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was trying to compare it with something that I already knew, but clearly I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I think you're right. I think it's
Good
a similar
guess.
process. I think it's a similar process, but I don't know
Exactly.
why. I don't know why they would have developed that trait.
Well, thank you. That's just good trivia to know anyways, to impress
Okay.
people.
Good.
When you find out, Joanna, come back and let us all know. Do
All right,
a little
team.
Google search. Ruth, go ahead. You're up on the docket, my friend. Give Ruth a moment to unmute. Oh, I think we gotcha. We gotcha.
Yeah, good. Oh, there we go. Lots of talking to oneself today. So thanks very much, Ingrid. That was really great. Your description support is always fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
So do you have any suggestions for a south-facing balcony?
Oh, a south-facing balcony is like if you want to grow vegetables or herbs. You can definitely do that. Yeah, you could grow strawberries. You just have to ensure that they catch enough of the light. And sometimes that means raising them by putting them on a bench or a stool. And my little patio garden here is walled, but it's south facing. So basically anything I want to get enough sun has to be right up against the north side of the patio, or I have a bunch of benches that I can set pots on that get them further up into the light.
Is that because otherwise you're like in pockets of shadow?
That's right. Yeah, and for vegetables and herbs, they need about 6 to 8 hours of sun a day of, like
this is why I can't grow tomatoes.
Yeah, you don't have enough sun.
I don't.
Yeah.
That's great. And I'm also curious about, you're talking about Japan. They're known for their little trees, right? The bonsai?
Bonsai, yeah.
Yeah. So would that be a balcony thing or not really?
Oh, it could be. They take a lot of maintenance, but there are small enough flowering cherry trees that they can be grown in containers. There's a dwarf weeping flowering cherry that's very pretty that does well in balcony gardens.
Great, good. So those are available. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I know this isn't the area that Ruth lives in, but a Metrotown Mall in Burnaby here in Vancouver has an actual bonsai tree store.
Whoa.
In it. So you can go and buy bonsai trees or the little things to decorate, the garden bed of them or things to fertilize them and feed them. I mean, they're really, really lovely. My brother actually bought a kit to grow his own bonsai. Just a kit out of a box. And so he was growing his own. So there's all sorts of things available out there. The internet is our friend in that perspective, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from folks of Ingrid? My brain is so full and I'm a really poor gardener. I always say I just plant the seeds and walk away. And if they grow, great. And if they don't, it's not my fault, but
It's very practical.
It's practical, except you're supposed to water them, which I always forget to do. So I was thinking, if I cut off a black thumb, will it grow back as a green thumb? I don't know.
I don't know, but like you said, set a reminder for yourself about watering.
I have to be better at that, because then at least
that's what I do.
20 minutes outside in the sun or something just to water your plants, right?
Yeah. I set reminders. Otherwise, I'm just too inconsistent, with the house plants. The outdoor plants, I have no problem being consistent with. I guess it's more habitual, and they need daily attention. But the indoor plants don't need that daily attention, and so they get a little bit neglected.
Listen, I kill silk plants, so
time to go to plastic.
That's right. You would think it's impossible, but it's not. So there you go. We have another hand, and it's Megan. I feel like I'm again calling the bingo balls. I'll give Megan a moment to unmute.
Yes. I know it's celebrated in Washington and in the UK and in Germany. What about in Hawaii or Australia as well?
They're
or
not
parts of Asia.
I'm sure that they're celebrated. They're not famous for their festivals, but I think any city that cares enough to plant flowering cherry trees will have people who want to celebrate that.
Okay. And where can you get cherry seeds? Because I worked at Sunshine Farm. And I'm wondering because we do plants as well, like plants and herbs. But cherry seeds would be perfect. And where could you get those?
Cherry seeds, I don't know that you can buy cherry seeds. Most cherries are propagated as young trees. So at a plant nursery, you would get, I think it's about a 2-gallon pot, and the young tree is called a whip, because that's what it looks like. And it's, might be about a slender, flexible 3-foot tall stick in the pot.
Okay.
Yeah. And from there it matures and becomes this beautiful, beautiful thing.
Okay.
I bet you can ask them at the farm, Megan. They might have some connections.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool. Yeah, I'll definitely talk to them about that.
Yeah.
Good.
Awesome. Now, Ingrid, have you experienced cherry blossom tea before?
I haven't. I'm dying to try it.
All right. Well, maybe this is a good time to bring Sarah into the space and see if Sarah's had a chance to sample some cherry blossom tea, because I'm super curious.
I hope it doesn't taste like chopped carrots.
Sarah, welcome. So did you get a chance to try the tea?
Yes, I was sipping away
and what's the verdict?
So it is a very interesting tea. I just want to say that it is a green tea base. It is sencha, so it makes a lot of sense. It is a Japanese green tea base. One of the things that I just want to say before I go into the taste is I like to brew my loose tea just in the cup, so I don't put it in a bag. And when things start to brew, it is just this amazing view of, you see the tea, it settles down into the bottom of the cup. It opens up, so it's kind of like the leaves on the tree. And then we have various fruit pieces and rose petals that float to the top. So it's actually, it's very much like what we see on the branch. When it comes to the tea, it's very floral. There's actually a berry taste to it as well. And although the Murchie's website says that it is a very light tea, I feel like this tea can definitely handle some sugar or honey. So it's a very, very, it's a beautiful taste. And I just wanted to add one more thing. Somebody on TripAdvisor had this tea, and they said the cherry blossom is to die for. So if anybody wants to have a try, please do let me know. And one more thing that I want to say is I want to thank the entire VocalEye staff, because my entire life, my dream has been on the job sampling tea or sampling food. And I have made it in life. So I just want to say a big thanks and to a good cup. Thank you.
Sarah, before we let you go, what's the best way? Because you just mentioned to brew this tea. So if somebody's going to get it at home, it's loose leaf tea. It's not in a bag. So how much do we put in a cup or in a pot if we want to brew it?
So if you want to have a lighter experience, I would just say grab a tablespoon, just any spoon that you have at home if you drink soup or whatnot, and put that amount in. But we will probably pre-portion that out for you because we'll be sending a sachet. I like to just allow all of the flavors to develop directly in the cup, which is why I prefer not to use a tea bag, but a tea bag would be excellent for
or a tea ball if you have a tea ball.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would brew it for about two minutes, and then I would inhale it first because it is a beautiful scent.
Okay. And then you said that some of the leaves or petals and stuff kind of float to the top. So don't be surprised if as you're sipping your tea, you feel the petals against your lips, or they'd be small, but just, I did that once with another beverage by accident, and I was shocked because I wasn't expecting there to be anything sort of tactile in the beverage. So,
right.
But then if you prefer to use a tea ball or a tea bag, you'll avoid all of that. So I'm really excited. I'm going to send an email to Sarah, SARAH @vocaleye.ca with my name and address and yes to a cup of tea. And Sarah's going to package all that up and send it out to anybody who wants to experience a little bit of cherry blossom tea. Awesome, friends. So that is our gift to the audience tonight for joining us. The information will also go out in the post-show follow-up email. So don't feel like you have to remember it. It'll be there as well, along with some other resources that we share and things like that. And I just want to, while we're here in the space together, talking about beautiful cherry blossoms, to again, just take a moment to dedicate this particular segment of this episode to our friend Josette Kernahan, who passed away on Monday night, and send our thoughts and our well wishes out to Josette wherever she may be. She'll be missed. I'll miss her laughter. At the theater, there was the last time just before the pandemic, I think we were all seeing the East Van Panto, and she made her homemade chocolate for everybody who went to the show and handed them out as Christmas gifts. And so she was just a lovely human who liked to take care of people. So let's keep her on our minds and our hearts, friends, as we remember our friend Josette Kernahan. Thank you, Ingrid, for joining us this evening. This has been a kind of a bit of a roller coaster from the dark and twisty to the light and twisty to the light and bubbly, and really appreciate you sharing all your wisdom, not only as a describer and describing the photos, but as a master gardener, and answering some of our gardening questions. So with that, I invite friends to enjoy the rest of their evenings.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.